I'd like to welcome everyone today to 2n1 Ministries. We're thrilled to have you join us. Today the theme of our lesson is We're at War with Communism Within. Before we start, I'd like to share a verse with you from the book of John that means a lot to me, and the verse is about peace. And we know the only way that we can really have peace within ourselves, within our families, and within our country, and even peace with the world, is to get saved. So, the verse I'm going to share with you goes like this. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. John 14, verse 27. So today, I want to emphasize that communism and peace are polar opposites. And I want to denounce communism in America. We denounce atheism and tyranny over America. And we rededicate our nation back to the Lord so that we can be a nation of freedom, capitalism, and peace. Please join us now with our teacher, Todd Frederick, and thank you again for joining us.
Okay, thanks for that introduction, Heather. And we are going through our book. This book this time is John Stormer's A Death of a Nation, or The Death of a Nation. I suggest that you pick one up, order it online. They're, of course, used. You might be able to find a new one, but these were printed back in 1968. So it's basically a history lesson, but you can apply it to today, as we will find out with what all we have to present. It's like today's headlines. But we're at war with communism within. It used to be back in the Cold War era, when we were at war, so to speak, with Russia, more like a war of words, that we had communism on the outside that was concerned about coming in and taking over. But basically, since, as John Stormer's been pointing out, the war from communism against America is within. And as we discussed last week, previous weeks, that you had things such as Supreme Court justices who ruled that communist professors and teachers could have the right to teach in our public schools. Well, that's just a gateway in bringing in communism to our would-be students. As we see people like Ocasio-Cortez, who is just a product of communist teachers. And so the definition of communism we'll start out with. In the book, The Republic, Plato proposed that a ruling class owns everything in common, putting the welfare of its state above all personal desires. Then in Thomas More, his book Utopia 1516, says that all the citizens share equally wealth produced by the industry. During the French Revolution, 1789 to 1799, some extremists favored revolutionary dictatorship to abolish private property. Sound familiar? Then Marxism basically was Karl Marx, which is not his real name, but a name he gave himself. He was a German Jew. He was a communist, and he believed the only way to ensure a happy, harmonious society was to have the workers in control. That's like saying, in order to make sure the inmates are happy, you need to let them run the asylum. So, Marx claimed that the owners of wealth, of the ruling class, let me start over again. He claimed that the owners of wealth are the ruling class because they use their economic power to force their will on the people. Then he held that the class struggle is the means by which history moves from one stage to the next. Marx assumed that the ruling class would never willingly give up its power and that struggle and violence were therefore inevitable. Karl Marx called for the abolition of capitalism. Capitalism is free enterprise, and he called for the abolition of it. So, according to Marx, the workers would establish a dictatorship of which the work that would work to set up classes, a classless communist society. Well, they say that classless, but then of course you've got the Brezhnevs and all the others who would be the leaders who are higher class, more privileged, such as like the Clintons and the Obamas and so forth. There would be no more need for government, police, or armies, and that things would be gradually become better. So what are we saying now? Well, we need to defund the police, but as soon as the leftists get offended and start getting attacked or feel threatened, then they want to bring in the police. They want to build walls, not at the southern border, but around the capital.
Let me add a little point there. If you don't believe that what we're saying is true, let me give you a true illustration of what happened to my father in World War II. They were living on a 32-acre farm in what used to be East Prussia, which is now part of Poland. But at one time, they had 100 Russian soldiers on their farm. So without police, you have no protection. And secondly, like Todd said, they want to come in and take whatever they can from you, as my family experienced that. Food and money were taken from them, and eventually their entire 32-acre farm was taken away from them, and they fled as refugees. So this is very real, and this is very applicable to what we are seeing unfolding this week in our nation.
Yeah, and this information I'm giving you about communism is actually from the encyclopedia, World Book Encyclopedia, 1972 edition. So probably all the other ones, the newer ones, like the 2020 edition, probably says communism is wonderful. So it says, no communist country has been able to abolish social classes. Conflicts and crimes have not vanished in communist society. Contrary to Marx's belief, Karl Marx's expectations, all workers do not show brotherly feelings for each other. Instead, national and racial hatred have often proved stronger than the class ties. So, whenever part of communism too is that there's no God, and since there's no God, then we're your God, or you become God. And so what we have is anarchy and confusion and rebellion and destruction and death and all those things when God is taken out of the equation, because society isn't meant to work without God and His rules. I mean, there has to be an overseer. Either you're going to obey God's rules or you're going to obey man's rules. And if you're obeying man's rules that are void of God's rules, then you're going to lose. So our study is that we're at war with communism, and then page 17, John Stormer tells us that do Americans have the courage to temporarily take the painful steps necessary to avoid runaway inflation? Now this section here is a dovetail in from last week, where he's talking about the point that communists have within this country to influence us and to destroy us from within is to have us be caught up in endless wars. We saw that with Vietnam, and which we dragged on years and years, causing our boys to get killed out there for basically a cause that we lost. Vietnam's communist today. And then the war on poverty, which we still have poverty today, but that was continuing to bankrupt our country, putting in all this monies to help make people feel good, and get lifted out of poverty. But people do that. They can do themselves a benefit of just working hard and being creative. We hear that society is having racial divisions and all like that. blacks are less fortunate like that. But you look at some of the people that have done real well, like George Washington Carver, and just a multitude of others. You have just basically listening to the amount of information coming from the communists, there's only one group that succeeds. But so they want to cause division amongst ourselves, and then try to bankrupt us with these endless wars, and then also aiding other countries, like I mentioned about last week. Our budget is giving money to foreign countries. Our money is going to foreign countries, while our own people, veterans and so forth, are lying sick in the streets, dying, and so forth. So the other prong that communists wants to do, not only to continue to deflate our money system to where we basically have a fiat money, it is also to bankrupt us morally. So Lenin's blueprint that he had come up with over 100 years ago, in like 1918, he says, "We'll make America's people so rotten and decadent morally that they will not resist an eventual communist takeover." And so this book was written, and bringing this point out, was written in 1968. And they were morally decadent back then. We're even more so now, so we're falling right into the hands of the communist, which ultimately behind communism is Satan. That's his tool to destroy the world again. So you have moral decadence, even more so now, because last summer the quote-unquote conservative Supreme Court that we have, including Gorsuch, Judge Gorsuch, he voted in favor of the homosexual people, the decadent people, transgender, and all those people, to have a special class status protecting them. So what God calls good, men call evil, and what men are calling good, God calls it evil. So we're falling into this decadence. So the communists are getting a lot of help from non-communists. So basically, like I said, Gorsuch is a communist, but because he's a non-communist, he is helping the communist agenda by putting his okay for homosexuals to be able to have a class status protection. So going right along with Lenin's plan, Lenin's probably rejoicing in his grave right now if he has the ability to. So we need to see people like J. Edgar Hoover. He was the one that founded the FBI. Of course, the FBI back in those days was actually good. And now we see it full of corruption. The communists have infiltrated it, the deep state, some may say. But J. Edgar Hoover said, it's basic to communist strategy to further communist objectives with non-communist hands. So you have that very thing taking place today. The non-communists are aiding. I mean, you got even pastors that will say, well, I think Trump should just go ahead and admit his defeat and move on. Now, these pastors are probably not communists, but they're being helpers to the communist agenda. So communist successes can be measured in a number of ways. Reader's Digest reported in May 1964, quote, that the smut industry, or the pornography industry, is approaching an estimated $2 billion. That was in May 1964, $2 billion. So if you do the rate of inflation on that, it's probably like over $100 billion. So it's estimated $2 billion a year volume, rapidly turning this country, America, into the pornographic capital of the world. And so how is that supposed to be? We're supposed to be a city set up on a hill, a shining light, and salt of the earth and all like that, and sending out missionaries and so forth. But we got, our nation is seen back then, 1964, as becoming the pornographic capital of the world. How much more is it now, some 57 years later?
Let me throw in a quick comment here. As you see, the name of our ministry is 2n1 Ministries. That goes back to the principle I first mentioned when God put his blessing on the first marriage, the first home with Adam and Eve. in the Garden of Eden. And there's a saying that goes like this: as goes the home, so goes the nation. So God said a man should leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife, and that they will be one flesh. It's not an open marriage in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, the two shall become one.
So
Therefore, we're two in one class.
even pornography is opening up your marriage and giving place to the devil, and that is surely destroying our homes and our nation.
Yeah, and so that's going right along with the communist satanic agenda. A committee of the U.S. Senate investigating juvenile delinquency reported that, quote, the moral fiber of the country is being undermined by a deluge of filth and vile books, pictures, and other pornographic material. Worst of all, up to 75% of it falls into the hands of minors. So even now we have in public schools, even in preschools, like some states like California, they're teaching diverse sexual activity, the homosexual agenda, in other words, to children as young as age 3. Can you imagine that? A 3-year-old, he didn't even know his left hand from his right hand, but they're telling him, no, well, you can be a boy if you want to be a boy, and the little girl's thinking, oh, really? I mean, these things are perverting, aiding to the delinquency of a minor. Why aren't these people arrested and dealt with according to the law to the strict extent? I mean, if you give a 3-year-old some marijuana, which I don't advocate they do, but if somebody was to do that, oh, it'd be all over the newspapers, and the person would be thrown in jail. But you say to a 3-year-old, you can have sexual relationships with your same-sex buddy there, and it's fine. That's aiding this moral decline.
I've lived a rather sheltered life, but recently I found out, shockingly, and much to my dismay, that there was a daycare in California that had some tunnels underneath the daycare which were being used for satanic ritual child abuse, which I was not educated on that, and did not realize that it was such a staggering problem in our country. So one of the things that I find that I am thankful for in our President Donald J. Trump is that is one of the first things that he signed an executive order against when he first got in office in 2016. So it is yes. So it is a huge problem, even here where we live in the Greenville, South Carolina area.
Yeah, and all these things are just continuing to erode away our foundations of this country. So if the moral fiber of the country is being undermined, we need to do something to do away with it. But the thing is, the Supreme Court's already ruled that pornographic material and the industry, the movie industry and all like that, plays that depict immoral acts and all like that, that's protected under freedom of speech. Okay, but freedom of speech to declare in the classroom that there's one Lord and one God, and thou shalt worship Him with all thy heart, soul, mind, and body. You can't say that, but you can, as we'll see in a few minutes, depict immoral plays in schools. In high schools across America, in 1967 and 8, when this was written, not last week. Well, it still is last week news, but in high schools across America's landscape, students are required to read such trash as then, I just had to change the titles, but it's J.D. Salinger's The Catcher in the Rye, which has 4 little words sprinkled on nearly every page. And on college campuses, students are being exposed to unbelievable filth. And the California newspaper reviewed in 1967 they reviewed this lewd, smut-ridden play, quote unquote, produced by Drama Department of California State College at Fullerton. Seems like nothing ever comes out of New York or California very well. So it says, the review said, quote, The Beard, unquote, a play by Michael McClure produced by students at California State College at Fullerton, is 60 minutes of verbalizing riddled by 4 little words, which leads to the final jolt. Performance of an oral sex act on stage in front of the audience, unquote. So here they're sitting there watching this play and all like that, and all of a sudden there's this immoral act done right in front of them, and they're like shocked. And so that's the whole purpose, is to continue to, like the Bible says, fools make a mock at sin. They mock this idea, thinking, well, this is supposedly like a bad thing to do and all like that. And so they are promoting immorality, while yet at the same time demoting morality. So the shocked reviewer said, where is the message and what is the value of such a production? That's a good question. The California State Legislature assigned a special committee to investigate. Finding the report to be true, it recommended that the faculty members responsible for staging the play to be fired, but they weren't. It says in its report, the investigating committee said it was, quote, appalled by the fact that the president of the college clearly stated that he would take no action of any kind against any person, actor, actress, or the distribution of any kind of material on campus pertaining to this. But if somebody's passing around information about, Christianity, that'd be a problem on campus unless and until it had been proven to be illegal and declared by a court. So you can pretty much do anything that's illegal, immoral, and so forth until it's proven to be so illegal. Where is the conscience? These people are like the Bible says, having a conscience seared as with a hot iron, with past feeling, and giving themselves over to lasciviousness and those type of things. So the committee feels that the administration is placing its view of academic freedom above morality and community responsibility. You should have morality first and then build everything upon it. What they're doing is stripping that away and just letting everything, what they want to, take place. And we saw that to be not working too well for the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. The college president, though, when questioned by the committee, said that because the person's morals are established before they get to college, that colleges neither could nor should do anything to influence the moral climate surrounding the students. Well, if they were just got finished being trained at home how to keep yourself pure until you get married, and we're going to send you off to college so you can be able to get a good degree and get a good job and be able to support your wife to stay at home. And they go to school, and there's this play that they have to sit there and watch, and it's showing this immoral act here. So it says, that's obviously influencing these already quote-unquote established morals that the kids have when they come to college. 5 members of the California legislature from Fullerton area resigned from the college advisory board. In resigning, they said, we cannot condone or tolerate the use of tax-supported educational facilities for public demonstration of oral copulation, whether simulated or real. We cannot continue to lend our names to an organization of quote-unquote friends of a college where this kind of moral degradation receives faculty approval, unquote. At least they had the backbone, but the problem is they left, and like I said a while ago, the faculty stayed. So everything's backwards. They should have fired them and jailed them and said this isn't permitted, even though you say it's freedom of speech. Well, stop being a hypocrite and have the freedom of speech go across the board to Christianity, that they could be able to have clubs without being censored and even shut down and called hate groups and so forth. With the young people being subjected to such influences, quote, half of the college girls have sexual relationships before marriage. And that's true, because look at the sororities and the fraternities. They're all like one big hotbed of immorality. So they get together and all this sexual activity, and then when they get married, they don't even have any kids, they don't have any sex, and all this stuff. You see that they're walking their dogs and having them in, having the dog in a little baby stroller and stuff. It's like, what's going on here? God made, first and foremost, sexual relationship to be a time of where a wife and a husband can be able to have intimacy with each other, which is solely amongst themselves, not amongst the whole group, and also for the purpose of repopulating the earth. I mean, so what we have now is immorality to the highest degree, and then you have abortions, which are killing off what babies that would be born, and then what babies are born, they're sent off to war and killed. So, births also to unmarried teenagers have increased 39% in the past 5 years. That was in 1968. So 39%. So of course, probably don't have that many teenage brides, as this one point comes out. 1 out of 3 brides are pregnant at the altar. Well, now it's probably none out of 3, because the 1 out of 3 had an abortion. And the venereal diseases among teenagers have increased 255% in 6 years. So that's a result of disobeying God. He says, if you obey me, and you're to be holy, for I am holy, as it says in 1 Peter 1:15 through 17. Be holy, for I am holy. So if we say, I'm going to be like Satan, I'm going to be unholy. Satan says, be unholy, for I am unholy. So we see the kids taking the same pathway of immorality that they're being taught, and so there are consequences to it. You get venereal diseases. You have unwed pregnancies. So you think, okay, well, I got to get rid of this baby because I can't raise it. Well, if you can't raise it, then don't be lying in bed and performing sex as though you're married. And if you are married, you should be doing that. Having sexual relationships, having babies, not saying, oh, we've had now too many and let's abort it, even in marriage. That's evil. So how are the communists doing? By 1968, communists could rejoice at their successes in creating the racial tension and turmoil in America's major cities. Sounds like today. We got racial tensions and turmoils in major cities. You got the capital of Portland just this week was ransacked, the capital, by Antifa. That was somehow hush-hushed. But when Ted Wheeler was questioned about it, he says, so you're telling me, you're trying to insinuate that I'm responsible for the Capitol invasion in Washington, D.C. because my capital was invaded? And yeah. So they could they could look at the hopeful anticipation of the stalemated war in Vietnam, or you could say Iraq or Afghanistan for today. The financial crisis is creating in Washington as a result of all these aforementioned crises financially. They can survey the moral and spiritual decay in the United States with confidence that they will not have to attack the United States because we're attacking ourselves with all these immoralities and so forth. And just as Lenin had said in 1918, quote, America will fall into our hands like an overripe fruit. And we're seeing that right now with the way the Constitution is being trashed. You got immorality, you got Ocasio-Cortez and these others like her, Nancy Pelosi, Omar, and so forth. They're wanting to destroy our country, but we have to stand strong, get revived through the Word of God, and turn this country around, or it'll be too late. Ring the bell, subscribe. See you next time.